Hi, everybody. This is Robin Galinsky and Dr. Dennis Becker with Outwitting the Manipulator podcast, our Friday 4 o'clock touching base on all things manipulative and exploring them.
Isn't that exciting news?
Yes.
Exploring things, all things manipulative. How exciting is that? Oh, boy.
Well, it's called the never-ending story.
Yeah,
It's
that's
called
so true.
Infinite source.
Yep.
Infinite source. And we don't seem to run out of topics. Today, we want to explore the idea of passive aggressiveness. And we have all heard of it. We've all thrown the term around, and I'm certain we've all done it.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about what it is. And when I say we're going to talk about what it is, Dennis and I are not therapists. We're not psychiatrists, psychologists, whatever the other alphabet letters are that they have. We're regular pragmatic people. We happen to approach everything from the viewpoint of effective communication as communication coaches. That's what we are professionally.
Well, let's clarify that we're, in addition to being regular people, we also probably between us have, I don't know, almost 20 years of formal education in this field. So we're not just plain old regular folks who haven't studied it.
But I want to make that distinction on
9
purpose,
books and
Dennis.
taught at Harvard and all that stuff. So we have a little bit of background.
It's not about the lack of ethos and communication. It's about the fact that I actually want to make the distinction that we're not coming from this from any therapeutic point of view, because nothing against therapy or psychiatry or all that, but I think my experience has been that that things get lost in the weeds of analysis paralysis, if you will. And so I just want to make it clear that we're coming from the perspective of being effective at communication and also thwarting, avoiding, controlling, stopping manipulative communication. And so that's the angle that we want to explore, this idea of passive aggression that happens. And well, that's it, Dennis.
But I do want to make the distinction, Robin. I don't mean to beat up this issue, but I want to make the distinction between what we do and what therapists and other health professionals do, because I have great respect for them, and they do have a lot of work that they do that we often compliment, and they compliment us. I mean, there are many times that both of us have been called in by a therapist or a psychiatrist because their patient is working with some communication issues that they are not particularly attuned to. That's where we can be very helpful. So we're educated and ready to go, but we're not taking a therapeutic view. We want you to know that, folks. This is not therapy. We're not looking at it that way. We're looking to give you pragmatic, what you can do in real time as the manipulation is happening to you, and how you can prevent yourself from ever having it happening to you. So that's why we're here. So go ahead, introduce today's
I think
topic.
about it more going forward than going backward. Therapists like to go backward and figure out the no, I don't mean that, Dennis.
Yeah, be careful. They'll hear that a different way.
I know, but just let me finish it has to do with going to the root of what you thought, or how did you get to that idea? What did your mother say to you? How were you raised? And that's all well and good, but we are going forward. What's happening right now in this moment?
Right. Exactly.
And what can you do about it? What should you do about it? Now that may open up a whole world of inquiry for you, and that's where the therapist will pick up the baton.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Let's protect you while it's happening, folks.
Yes. So passive aggression. Let's talk about, what does it look like? Passive, but aggressive.
Okay, so there are two words here. We put two words into this one term, passive aggressive. There are two words, and they seem opposite because they are. And this is not to say that these are the only two attitudes and behavioral behaviors that people have, but if we look at just these two, passive behavior and aggressive behavior, they are opposite, as we say. People who are aggressive, who have an aggressive attitude and a behavior towards dealing with other people and other issues, are very outgoing, very assertive, very attacking almost, very demonstrable. Most of them are aggressive when you're aggressive like that. And the tone is different. The sound is different. It begins to sound a little bit more like, even when you're giving a compliment, you look really good. You begin to sound like that. That's an aggressive sound. On the other hand, people who are passive, it's not that they don't have aggressive thoughts, but they don't express it that way. Passive people are more likely to be like that, more quiet, more silent. They'll wait their turn. They won't just interrupt. They won't just interject. They're much more quiet. Sometimes they keep it to themselves and they never say anything about it. And that's where the term passive aggressive comes from. These are folks who might be on the inside in the way they think about you or the topic or the issue, think very aggressively. But on the outside, they're very passive. They're kindly, they're soft, they don't say anything, they're willing to take it, and so forth. So the term passive aggressive has both meanings in it at the same time. And dealing with people like that, who are both
It's
passive and
frightening.
aggressive, is a challenge.
It's
That's why we're
very,
talking.
very, very difficult.
Yeah.
I find it to be one of the most disturbing people who are consistently that way. Because let's face it, most of us will use that tactic in a certain situation, right, Dennis? A certain context, or maybe with a mother-in-law or somebody where you feel like I can't really come out and be direct, or but there are people who only communicate passive aggressively all the time.
Or only passively or only aggressively all the
I
time.
know, but we're talking about
But
passive aggressive.
we're
We're talking
combining
about the
those two.
mashup.
Yeah, that's a difficult thing. When you have an only aggressive or an only passive person, you kind of know how to deal with it. You see it, it's easy to identify, and you've already perhaps adapted techniques for dealing with people like that. But when you put the two of them together, passive aggressive, it can often be what, how, what it, where you don't know quite what to do sometimes.
I
That's the
think
whole
it
point.
it goes with plausible deniability. Right? One of the reasons people use passive aggressive behavior is that they want to have plausible deniability. So it's another reason they use ambiguity. They want to be able to say, "Oh, you took
Oh,
that wrong.
oh,
Oh,
I
I
didn't
didn't
do
mean
that.
that.
Oh, don't be
Oh,
silly.
you thought that that's what
Yeah.
I meant."
Yeah.
And you know full well that is what you meant. There, by
Mhm.
the way, this is an aside, a little bit of an aside, Dennis, but there's a stuff bubbling up in podcasts now. There seems to be these trends that infiltrate, and all of a sudden everybody picks up the baton about, can you trust your intuition, and telling people maybe they shouldn't trust their intuition or their gut. I completely disagree with this.
Hmm.
You need to trust it more than ever now, more than ever. And yes, you need to check it for bias, and you need to check
Yeah.
it for, other things that you know are challenges for you. But you do need to trust your intuition,
Yeah.
especially in the case of passive aggression.
Yes. Now, the thing about all of that modern trend that concerns me is that your intuition, let's not even get into the definition of intuition at the moment, but your current thinking about a thing, your view of something, the way you express it, what you say about it, and how you feel about it is often contained and emanates from and is born and is nurtured in something that happened maybe long ago or something that you learned and is deep in your subconscious and just comes out. And you don't even know that it's the reasoning as to why it's coming out. It's something that you learned long ago. I don't think about it anymore. It's just the way I think. And when you express something openly like that, and then you stop and think, why? I don't know why. I'm not sure where intuition comes into all of that, because some people just don't understand that they have deeply held concerns, beliefs that have been put into their subconscious over their lifetime. And
I
it's
I hear what you're
nothing to do with
saying, and
intuition.
yes, that is a caveat. But that's why we say you always have to be curious,
Yeah,
including curious about yourself.
absolutely.
Oh, why did I react so strongly to that? What did that
Absolutely.
mean for me? What did
Mhm,
that bring
mhm.
up for me? Okay, that's a little bit of therapy, but it does work to be curious about yourself.
Yeah,
But I would never tell someone never listen to your gut, especially when it comes to
yeah,
identifying manipulation.
yeah, yeah, of course.
So passive aggressive. So this is what happens. People will do things, say things that appear one way on the surface,
Mm,
but you feel like it's actually that they're angry, they're upset, but they're
mm.
not telling you they're angry or upset. So let's give an example, Dennis. Do you have a good, juicy passive aggressive example?
I recall dealing with a guy who had, I forget now whether this was his assistant or his partner. I forget who it was now, but they had differentiated and defined roles in the company. And the one who I was dealing with was more or less the boss, the senior partner. And I think the other person may have been his assistant of some kind. Uh, and he would need something. The first fellow would, let's give them names. The first one might be called Mike, and the assistant will call Jim. Okay. So Mike would say, look, hey, Jim, we got to get this thing ready, and it's got to be sent to Idaho by the end of the week. So I'll look it over, and you take a look at it and see what you think about it, and then see if you can get it to me by noontime so that we can get it ready and have it over there in their hands by the end of the week. Okay. And Jim would say, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. And that would be it. End of the week would come, never be done. Mike, hey, Jim, what happened to that? You were going to get it ready. Yeah. Yeah. Now, what happened there? It wasn't that Jim was being unpleasant or nasty or ornery, or he whatever it was, he didn't do it. Why didn't he do it? Even though he said he would do it and he would have it agreed, he agreed that he'd have it done. The aggressive part of him was answering, yeah, yeah, I'll get it done. It'll be okay. We'll get it out there at noontime, or whatever it was. The passive side of him was saying, man, you got so much else to do. Why does he keep giving you this stuff? Let him do it by himself. I'm not gonna, yeah, yeah, okay, I'll get it done. And it never got done. So the passive aggressiveness was expressed in that way. Mike thought, yes, yes, we'll get it done. That's the aggressive part. Jim thought, I'm not doing it that way. That's the passive part. So which one do you deal with? How do you know which is which?
Good question.
Yeah, it is. So how do you deal with that? Okay. When you have to deal with a passive aggressive person, you first of all have to identify that. Identify that is the nature, the behavioral pattern, the style of communication that they have. Now, how do you do that?
Okay,
Well, go ahead.
patterns. You said a keyword pattern.
Yes,
Identify
there you
pattern.
go. There you go.
That's one way that you really have to. I mean, write it down so that you can
Yep.
identify the pattern, because otherwise you'll second guess yourself.
Yep. And a passive aggressive person will have a pattern like that. They will
Yes.
respond that way. Oh,
Oh
yeah,
my
okay, we'll get
gosh.
it done. Yeah, okay, all right. And it doesn't get done. Or you have to
I'm
say
just
two or three
laughing
times.
about I always think of these examples pop in my head, thinking about a kid that you're trying to get dressed and a toddler, and then they make their body go limp, over and over again. And you say, you have to get dressed, you have to get dressed. You say, okay, okay. And then
Okay,
they
okay.
flop their arms and they make it impossible for you to get, that is, that's it right there.
We both threw that with all of our kids between us. I know. That's that's a typical example, and anybody who has kids knows what that one's about. When you're dealing with a passive aggressive person, the first thing to recognize is that it is indeed a pattern. Now, sometimes people come across that way because they may be truly preoccupied, or maybe they're not feeling well and they think that they want to get it done and they really do, but something else comes up. And so you
Oh,
can't
you are always
say that
so nice giving an out.
it is, though. Sometimes it's not really passive
Mm,
aggressive. That's why a pattern is important.
okay, but we don't need to talk about that. We need to talk about when it is, because and it's
Okay.
really common in
All right.
professional fields. I can't tell you how many times we've been
Yes,
brought in by HR because somebody's got a PIP,
that's
performance
right.
improvement plan,
That's
and
right.
I think of it as trying to wrestle a greased pig, which is a very, visual metaphor of you can't pin down a greased pig. They just keep squeaking out of your hands. And people will be in a professional setting, they'll be at their wits' end with
Yeah.
a person who just
Yeah.
simply tells you what you want to hear and then does the other and
Yeah.
gives you a million excuses why.
Yeah. You're right. And we both have been invited to into HR situations and many others where the boss will say, look, I don't know what's going on with Barry. He this or that, and describes passive aggressive behavior. The boss doesn't know what the heck to do about it. So we both have had a lot of familiarity with that, Rob, and I know. I'm just thinking too that passive aggressive people, they they don't always know. They don't
That's true.
describe themselves as being passive aggressive. They are trying to be cooperative and they want to say yes. Like Jim, let's say my example, Jim is a guy who wanted to do, he knew it was right, knew it had to be done by a certain time, and he knew what had to be done, and he wanted to agree to it, and he agreed to it. Now, that type of
Well,
agreement,
can I just pause you there? Don't you
what?
think, and again, I'm going to sound like I'm doing therapy here, but it's almost as though there's a disconnect in themselves between
Yes,
who they think they are and who
yes,
they really are.
yes, yes, yes. That's exactly right. They may be very well intended, actually,
That's
intended to get that
one
work done.
thing, though, or they're just manipulative.
Or that's where you and I are
And that's
concerned.
where we stand.
That's right. That's right. So we can let's agree that there are these two types of passive aggressive people, at least two types, and we'll for now only talk about the one that we believe is truly being manipulative, because the other one, nice folks, mean well, don't get it done. Different approach that you have to take with that because they need different kind of things. But people who are being manipulative of you, themselves don't regard it as being manipulative. They don't, that's because they're not honest with themselves. They don't say, oh, I'm going to manipulate Mike. And I'm
Yes,
going to do,
right. That's different than
that's different.
the flat out, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then I'm going to do whatever
What
I
I
feel
feel like.
like.
That's exactly right. And we do have to deal with some of those folks. You know, Robin and I, and all of those of you who are listening to us all this time. No, we deal with those too. We're talking about a different type of
So,
passive aggressive right now.
and
Go ahead.
professionally, I'll say, because I do think Dennis said it may be more prolific in a professional setting. Why? Because it's much harder to say how you really feel or do what you really want when you're in a professional setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The consequence happened live.
Okay.
Oops. Looks like we had a little internet blip there. Did you notice that, Robin? Somewhere. So the question comes with all of this: how do you deal with passive aggressive people? What do you do with them? Whether they're
Push them
being
in front of a train.
there's Robin, folks, where you can be you can clearly identify that they're being manipulative or they're not. There is a way to deal with passive aggressive people that we want to suggest to you, and um,
Would
try it
this
out and
be
let
the
us know if it
manipulative
works.
ones, Dennis, or
Either
the,
way, either way, whether they're being manipulative or they're just being themselves, they don't even know that it's manipulative. When you have a passive aggressive interaction with someone and it's annoying to you and you want to rectify it, you want to be sure it never happens again that way. First of all, you've got to make folks aware of it. So, like we've been saying about everything else with manipulation, awareness is one of the most important things. They have to be aware that you're aware of what they're doing. So you have to help them become aware of their behavior as being manipulative. Now, whether you address it as passive aggressive using those words or not, doesn't matter. And sometimes it's better not to, because that carries with it a certain expectation of behavior, and it's like blaming them. So don't do that. Then, when you give them a behavior that you would rather they not have, you got to say what it is. Do not do this, or you do that. When you talk to me in this way, or you talk to me in that way. So you have to let them know what you feel is offensive to you. There's a different word. It's offensive to you, is irritating to you. That's the first thing. Secondly, you have to give them a consequence. And if it happens again, or if it continues to happen, something like that. Now, both of these things, making them aware, citing the situation, and giving them a consequence, must be done in short sentences, simple, small, short sentences, not a long
so
explanation or rationale. Go ahead, Robin.
how does that work when they have plausible deniability and they tell you that they didn't mean that and they didn't do that? We need a specific example here
Okay,
that's
that's okay. Accept it.
extremely ambiguous.
Accept that. Accept it if they say, okay,
So how
that's
does
okay.
it look?
And
Play it out with,
I think it's okay for you to say that you accept that. Whether you do or you don't, I think it's okay for you to say that you accept that behavior, even if you think they're lying to you. Otherwise, you're going to get into a whole different discussion about untruth
So
and truth. So you've got to be real specific with them about what it is that bothers you. They say, "Oh, I don't do that." Well, okay. If you don't think you do, fine. If you do, fine. But in the future, if I notice it again, instead of making it threatening, like if you do it again, say, if I
that's
notice
an
it
important
again,
distinction you just made,
yes,
by the way.
that is an important distinction. When you do that, you've got to accompany that with a consequence. So if I notice it again, I'll bring it to your attention
In the
like that
moment.
in the
In the
moment
moment.
as it's happening. Yes, I'll bring it to your attention.
Which could be very effective in a professional setting because that moment could be with others witnessing it. It could
Yeah.
be in a meeting, and they will be much more guarded and careful about when they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very important, just to reiterate what you said, Dennis, that distinction between saying, if I notice it again, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to next time you do that, I
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
Very different language. It's
Yeah.
more of the words that Dennis said are very important, but the tone in which he
Yeah.
delivers them.
Mm-hmm.
So he had that very calm voice. Well, and if you're watching us on video, you can see Dennis is a very calm, nonverbal face. Well, if I notice it again, I'll bring it to your attention in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Now,
If you do that again, I'm
yeah,
calling you out.
that's different. Yeah. Yeah. That's a way to do it. I
But
understand that.
then that's the words aligned with the
Yeah.
tone. I could
And the
also
tone.
say, well,
Yeah.
if I notice it again, I'm calling you out.
Well, calling you out, even calling you out,
I'm sorry. I'll
I'll bring
bring
it
it
to
to your
your attention.
attention.
Yeah. Okay. It's a
So you got
word
to get
makes
the
a
tone
difference.
aligned with the words is my point. I
Yeah,
was
it
trying to
makes a
mix and
difference,
match them,
folks.
but I didn't do it right.
Now let's go back to the example of Mike and Jim. Let's say that Jim has this pattern. He's Mike notices Jim's pattern. Okay, and he does it over and over and it's all the time. So how do you correct someone like that? If you have to continue working with them, you can't get away from them. How do you correct someone who has a passive aggressive manipulative behavior? How do you do that? Okay, the first three things we said were okay. Bring it to their awareness, cite the situation, cite a consequence, short sentences, simple language, okay, easy facial expression. Okay. Then here's something a little bit tricky. Now you have to be careful of how you do this, particularly if you're a supervisor. This is really helpful. You give that person, give the Jim in question, give that person another assignment. Like Mike said to Jim, we got to get it by, we want to get over to them by the end of the week. Okay. You give them a different kind of assignment. You say, I'd like to have this completed by 10 o'clock this morning. Now, you got to be realistic about what can be done by 10 o'clock this morning. You just make up stuff and force them to do it. But if it's a doable task that can be completed in a short time, you give them a short time. You never give a passive aggressive person an open-ended thing or a long time. Make it short. Depending on the process, it might be,
Specific.
and very specific. It might be by
And how,
tomorrow.
and to the point of not just the time, but how are they supposed to deliver it to you?
Yes.
Printed, an
Right.
email,
Right.
FedEx,
Yep.
by
Yep.
carrier pigeon,
Drop it
which
on
is
my
the
desk.
method?
Right. Email, whatever it is. Now, let's assume that they get it done because passive aggressive people often will get that done because it's a short time and they kind of know you're upset and but they want
Yeah,
to
they want
continue
to
their
build their
behavior.
credibility back.
Doesn't mean they're going to change, but if they get it to you on time, give them another one. Same thing, short assignment, short time frame, specific responsibility, and measure it. And then do it again,
What if
maybe
you have
three
no
times.
authority to do
Now,
that?
of course, you got to give them the authority to do it. You don't just
No, no,
have to
no,
do
no,
something
no.
they
I'm
can't
saying,
do.
what if you don't have authority and
Oh,
the
if you
person
don't
you're
have the
dealing
authority.
with is a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
peer
Yeah,
who's
yeah, yeah.
constantly dropping the ball, somebody on your team who doesn't do their part,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you don't have the authority to give them.
Okay. Then rather than giving it to them as a delegation, you ask it of them as a collaborative experience, as a favor, if you will, almost. You ask them to have it done by this time, and let's see what happens.
Well,
Chances
okay.
are, chances are when you're really polite, they won't do it anyway because they feel still in control. That's why I'm saying you have to be a little bit more deliberate with a passive aggressive person. What are we going to say, Robin?
I was gonna say, so now what do you do when they don't do it? Because they don't do it, because that's what they do.
Okay. Now, if it continues to happen, when you're dealing with a manipulative person, let's go to that one for a moment. When you're dealing with a manipulative person, you have to put into action those kind of things that Robin and I have been telling you right along. You may want to get away from that person if you can. You may want to stop the interaction with them. You say, look, if you say this to me again one more time like that, I'm not going to be able to work with you any longer. Each time you do it, there's a pattern. I give it to you. This happened, that happens. It's not going to happen again. If it happens again, we have to stop having this relationship.
Whatever you do, don't say anything like that unless you're prepared to
Oh,
follow through. The
yeah, yeah,
first
yeah,
time
yeah.
you don't follow through, you're going so far
Yep,
backwards,
yep.
you can forget about it.
That's right. These are
Because they
difficult.
know you don't mean what you say
Yeah.
and you're done.
And even if you do mean it, if you don't carry out the consequence and you don't put measurable assignment to it by Thursday on my desk by morning, if you say it again, if you don't put measurable things to it, you're never going to stop that behavior.
Well, for the
So,
most part, you're never going to change this person, though. You may
no.
be able to get some performance out of them in the
Yep.
short run, but you need to realize that
Yep.
now the one who's maybe not using passive aggression is pure manipulation. There may be hope with self-awareness that they
Mm,
realize it's costing them relationships and they start to change,
mm,
or they're willing to change, but the change comes from their own initiative and their own intention. The other one, the people who use it as manipulation, most likely they're going to use a different tactic, immediately
mhm,
use a different tactic.
mhm, mhm.
So it's never going to change. This is why someone who's just manipulative all the time, there's no hope.
And you've
There's
heard us,
just, you need to get away from them.
yeah, you've heard us mention this before about getting away. Sometimes you can't get away from them. Believe me, if you continue to do what we're suggesting, they'll want to get away from you.
Well,
Why?
that's an
This is
excellent point, Dennis.
this is really
Ding,
important.
ding,
They
ding.
don't want to work. They don't want to keep
They
doing
don't
it.
want to be held accountable,
Yeah. And if you keep doing
and they
it,
don't want someone who's onto them
yeah,
and exposing them, and certainly not in a work environment where you've
right.
said, I'm just going to bring that to your attention. And I'm in, wherever we are, whenever this comes up, Bob,
Oh boy.
whatever situation we're in, just to be helpful to you, I'm going to bring it to your attention
Yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
this happens in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that you will be ghosted like nobody's business, and you'll be happy about being ghosted by
Have
Bob.
we, as we've told you
Um,
before, listen, these manipulators, they don't want to work hard. They're extremely smart and they'll go for all kinds of situations and targets. But once they know that you're on to them, bye-bye, they're
that's your
off to somebody else.
inoculation.
Now,
Yep, that's your protection.
that's your
But it
protection.
takes a lot of paying attention,
Yeah.
vigilance. You can't be distracted. You're
No,
not going to see the pattern if you're not
no,
paying full attention.
that's right.
And then it takes courage.
And we've said before, if you're not exactly sure if that was, that didn't happen before, did it? Write it down in your notes. The
Mm-hmm.
journal that we've talked about, put it in your notes.
Mm-hmm.
Look back, this seems familiar. Yipper.
Because
You're
they
going to
will
find out.
rewrite the narrative. That's another
Yep.
tactic. They'll
Yep.
recreate the narrative,
Yep.
and
But
yeah,
the tactic will remain basically the same. The narrative may change, but the tactic will be there. And as we've said over and over and over, it's never going to be just this one tactic. It's going to be coupled with two others or another one. And every time you call them out, they'll have another thing about you. So best if you can get away from them. But if you can't get away from them by doing what we're suggesting today, they will want to get away from you because they do not want to be held responsible. They do not want to be found out. They don't want to be embarrassed in front of somebody else. They'll go for an easier target than you have become. So that's a good advice from us to you today, folks.
and I'm sure, Dennis, that not only people who are dating, looking for a partner, a lifetime partner, whatever, but people who are in hiring in HR really would love to get a handle on not choosing this person who operates this way because it creates so many problems. The cost cannot be measured. The cost of ineffectiveness and inefficiency in an organization cannot be measured.
Yeah.
Not to mention the toll it takes on the morale of
Oh,
others.
yeah.
This person is, you do not want this person on your team. You do not want them in your organization.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're in your family, you want to contain them
Mm-hmm.
like Chernobyl, you need to rope them off. It's just, it's not good. It's just,
You're only gonna rope them off. These are human beings, they haven't been infected with something. They will infect you, maybe.
they are infected. They're full of toxic energy
Yes,
that
I
comes
know.
out in communication, and it is
Yeah.
like poison. It infects others. It erodes the way people feel about themselves. If you allow it, you don't have to allow it.
Well,
Oh, there's no end.
to come full circle with this, though, Robin, maybe that's when people could use therapy. That's when therapists can
Well,
be
it's a
helpful.
killer combo, right?
Yeah, it's a killer
Therapist
combo. Is
and a
exactly right.
communication coach is a killer
Yeah,
combo because we're boots on the ground. We're in the
yeah,
moment,
yeah,
where the rubber meets the road, as life is happening. And a
yeah,
therapist is more about where did it go wrong and, so awareness and healing and all of that stuff.
There are
But
some places where some of our coaches have affiliations with the local therapeutic or psychoanalytic association, so that when those folks come into communication difficulties and they haven't had the kind of background we have, they turn them over to us. And vice versa. We always know when someone needs therapy, where you and I are not either qualified or interested in doing therapy with them, we will pass them on to someone who truly can and does do that sort of a thing. So they're two different things, as we started today's show by talking about. But I love your description, Robin. We are boots on the ground for it. That's exactly right. We made it face to face. We meet them face to face, voice to voice every day. So, and that's
and
why
and
we're
you're
here, folks, with you every week.
and you're always going to be in process with communication. You are never going to
Yeah.
be perfect. The
Right.
key is that you're paying attention
Yeah.
and you're trying to do something and you're identifying things that are
Yeah.
happening and
Yeah.
you're not rolling over into the same pattern, Pete and
Right.
repeat, Pete
Yeah.
and repeat, Pete and repeat.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, you're stuck in the mud, you're spinning your wheels, you're not where the rubber meets the road making traction. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you got to get out of that
Yeah.
unless you want a life of misery, then you can
Yeah.
stay there because
But that's
that's
why we're here. And that's why we're here every Friday at 4 and in our book. And, we have upcoming. Oh, Robin, why don't you share a little bit about the upcoming workshops and things where we can meet people in person?
yes,
Let's talk
go
about
to,
that.
yes, please. We have a live virtual workshop starting in May, and you can go to outwitinrealtime.com. So if you're catching this podcast at a different time, there'll be updated dates for our workshops. Outwitinrealtime.com will have everything you need to know, and you can connect with us through all the many portals, which we won't manipulate you with.
I'm really looking forward to it, aren't you, Robin? I mean, I am. I love to
I
meet
always
people
am.
face to face.
Yes.
We do a lot of our work face to face as well. Some of you may know that, but these workshops are going to be a lot of fun. They're going to be very helpful, and they'll be very pragmatic. We are going to demonstrate and discuss all the things that we've been talking about here that are in our book and so forth. We'll be talking about and using them live with those of you who attend. So, and we have some one-on-one coaching ability. So we've really ramped up the game so that we can have more interaction with you personally. So check it out, outwitinrealtime.com. And we'll look forward to seeing you at all of those things. They start in May of this. I don't know when you're seeing this, but May of 2024. And then we've got them coming up in 25. So take a look. You'll like it. We've enjoyed doing it. Now we have to wrap up. Robin, you want to make any last final comments here?
Nope.
Nope. Oh my goodness. This this is a
It's a
wrap up.
miracle.
When it's a miracle that Robin has nothing else to say.
Hurry up before something pops in my head.
Yeah, okay. But we're reminding you folks that today, when we're talking about passive aggressive people, whether they're manipulative or not, by on purpose or not, that being straight with them, being direct, being short sentences, making them aware that you're aware of it, giving direct consequences, following up on those consequences. These are the
Letting them
things
know
you
that
have
you'll
to
bring it
do.
to their attention in the
Letting
future.
them know. That's it.
Don't
Doesn't
forget
have to
that
be,
part.
doesn't have to be mean, doesn't have to be nasty, doesn't have to be, even as we talked about it in other parts of the book and the podcast, doesn't even have to be feisty. It can just be direct. Let them know that you know, because eventually they will want to get away from you. They do not want to have to work hard. So let's make it hard for them. Make it difficult. Be aware, do the kind of things we suggested today to you. In the meantime, we'll invite you and urge you to be with us again next Friday at 4 o'clock live Eastern Standard Time, and look for us on outwittinrealtime.com. And until we see and hear from you again, for my colleague Robin Galinsky, I'm Dr. Dennis Becker saying thanks for listening and bye for now.